MOU was adopted by the governments of the United States of America and Georgia on January 14th, taking into account that secure fifth-generation wireless communication networks, 5G, will be vital to both future prosperity and national security. The United States and Georgia declare their desire to strengthen cooperation on 5G. 5G will enable a vast array of new applications, including the provision of critical services to the public, which will benefit our citizens and our economies.
Increased amounts of data on 5G networks will further interconnect the economies of the world, including the United States and Georgia, and facilitate cross-border services and commerce. Protecting these next-generation communication networks from disruption or manipulation and ensuring the privacy and individual liberties of the citizens of the United States, Georgia, and other countries is of vital importance. The US and Georgia each expressed their belief that all governments have a shared responsibility to undertake a careful, balanced evaluation of 5G hardware and software suppliers and supply chains to promote a secure and resilient 5G architecture.
Georgia will purchase 200 million cubic meters of gas from Russia in 2021, according to the document of natural gas balance approved by the Ministry of Economy. This volume amounts to about 7% of Georgia's total gas supply. The government will buy the gas from Russian State Energy Corporation, Gazprom Export.
The Ministry of Economy predicts that gas consumption will increase by 186 million cubic meters and reach around 3 billion cubic meters in 2021. Gas supply growth totally accounts for the Azerbaijan side, and Georgia will receive around 2.5 billion cubic meters of natural gas this year. Accordingly, the share of Azerbaijani gas will be over 92% of total consumption.
Infectious Diseases, AIDS and Clinical Immunology Research Center announces tender on the purchase of 60,000 PCR tests. According to the website of the State Procurement Agency, the estimate cost of the tender is around 2 million, meaning that the state pays 27 Georgian lari per PCR test.
According to the submitted tender information, the test must be authorized by the FDA or the EU pharmaceutical regulator. The companies participating in the tender must submit their proposals by February 10.
Georgia's foreign exchange reserves increased by $404 million in 2020, and as of December 31st, they reached around $4 billion. The volume of reserves increased despite the National Bank of Georgia selling $873 million for the national currency stabilization.
In 2020, the National Bank made a total of 26 currency interventions to mitigate the fluctuations of GEL exchange rate. The reserve increase was due to the foreign debt of $1.5 billion attracted by Georgia during the crisis.
Yes, and this is the Checkpoints, hosted and co-authored by Ivanishvili and myself. I'm Georgi Sakadze. This is the first show of 2021. The Checkpoints is back to tell you more about businesses and economics.
The day and the time is unchanged. We meet at 10 p.m. every Sunday and try to bring local and global perspective to the table.
Yes, and let us start locally. And for sure, undoubtedly, the main development is Bidzina Ivanishvili's departure from politics. This is the second time that Ivanishvili is leaving the official post, but unlike the previous departure, now Ivanishvili's firm position is that he will not be returning to the political arena. The only thing we can say here is, well, time will show. At this point, he has left us with a quite long letter and 2 interviews, one for the magazine and another one for public broadcaster. We have to say that not much emphasis was on the economy, either on his letter or in the interviews that I just mentioned. What we can digest for you shortly here is just some points. This was the first big news that we got to know this week about Bidzina Ivanishvili's future plans. Namely, he transferred a significant part of his business and real estate assets in Georgia, which he owns through offshore companies, to the Cartu Charitable Foundation. Changes in the public registers were fixed on the last days of December 2020.
Yes, Georgi, and the biggest change was on December 31, when the Tourism Development Fund, which owns the facilities under construction of Panorama Tbilisi and Paragraph Shekwatili, was transferred to the Cartu Fund. Prior to the change, 100% of these companies were owned by Panamanian Frankston International SA. The volume of the authorized capital of the company, according to the financial statements for 2018, was 580 million Georgian lari. Just to remind our viewers, the Tourism Development Fund includes Tabori Resort, Sololaki Hills, a hotel project under construction in Ganmukhuri, as well as real estate in Chakvi and Abastumani.
Thanks for the comment, Elena. Absolutely right. And the change of ownership did not affect the projects managed by the Co-Investment Fund. Hence, Access Towers, Galleria Tbilisi, and the owner of the hydropower plants under construction are unchanged. Later, Bidzina Ivanishvili explained his decision in the interview with Entrepreneur, stating that he had already stated his intention to spend not less than 90% of his property on charity and public affairs. However, this statement did not receive a proper response from the media and the public. I made that decision a long time ago. In fact, this is a logical continuation of my decision, Ivanishvili noted in his last.
But on the other hand, Georgi, we saw clearly that Bidzina Ivanishvili had high hopes for higher profits in Georgia.
Well, since you mentioned that, yes, Bidzina Ivanishvili said he was dissatisfied with his business profitability in Georgia. As Ivanishvili noted himself, a number of his companies are still unprofitable. And to him, it would be better, much better for the business to show a higher profit margin. It would be better, of course, if Cartu Bank attracted more investments, but unfortunately we could not do that. So I cannot be satisfied with the results and figures. It seems I could not pay proper attention to the businesses, especially after coming into politics, he said. However, to Ivanishvili, this is not the only reason why profits were not high. He said another reason for the inefficiency of his business companies might have also been the fact that he had never used his excess financial resources to create barriers for other businesses on the market and thus hinder proper competition. I always wanted to help the market and make the environment as healthy as possible, Ivanishvili said in his interview. Therefore, for me, profits have never been the only goal. I had a sincere desire to help the country, and I choose to do business not only to gain profits, but to help the country in the sectors it needed the most.
And he also said Georgia was still a poor country, but he would not take an allegation that it was the reason of GD rule, right?
Right, and poverty. We have to say that definitely his rare focus in terms of the economy and its developments were poor. Figures show that our economy is 10 times behind Europe and European standards. Former chairman of ruling party Georgian Dream, Mr. Ivanishvili said in an interview with the Georgian public broadcaster, according to him, the country's economy should be developed by improving the education system and investing significant resources in this sector. We are poor. Losers enter politics, mostly those who have achieved nothing. They think doing politics is the easiest. We do not have professionals in any field, and this is our biggest tragedy. We managed to take a big step towards reforming the education system. Spending more on education is a precondition for the dignified future. We're poor, it is easy to count the economy in figures. We are 10 times behind Europe. A lot of time and effort is needed to grow the economy even by 5–10%, Ivanishvili said. On the other hand, he believes that the Georgian Dream government managed to stop downfall in the country. We have managed to stop downfall in the country for 8 years. Today we have fundamentally better situation in all directions. Well, now they say, look how many people live in poverty. I know that is clear, you cannot overcome it in 5 minutes. It needs time. Ivanishvili mentioned to him, Georgian Dream has shown how the European healthy government can work, serving its people. Many would oppose, but today we stop here.
But we will be, in fact, checking his last words before the final departure from politics, as he claims. Now, Georgi, Bidzina Ivanishvili also touched upon Forbes and its calculations of his fortune, stating that he stopped cooperating with this magazine long ago and that he has no idea where the figures come from. My personal attitude as the executive editor of Forbes Georgia was, Mr. Ivanishvili, come on, sincerely. You are the chief editor with very good connections with editors of Forbes Russia, by the way. So the checkpoints give you the floor for our answer to the, to me, totally ungrounded allegations, since the methodology as transparent as it can be when it comes to counting billions.
I knew you would make me respond to this quote from this platform as well. No problem. Now, always ready when it concerns Forbes. Ungrounded or not, Bidzina Ivanishvili had always had a chance to approach Forbes for changes in his fortune. So the very first question that pops in mind is, why didn't he do that? If he did, why didn't he follow up on that? But it's worth to mention, that it is not us to whom he should approach for changes or update regarding his wealth, or, as you have absolutely correctly mentioned, his fortune. It should be the same group with whom, as Mr. Ivanishvili mentioned in his interview, he was collaborating in 2005, and it seems to me that it should be the team of Forbes Russia. As for us, I really enjoy the attitude coming from the wealthiest person of Georgia and former politician Bidzina Ivanishvili, and Forbes Georgia team, together with BMG, will continue doing our job, delivering and producing the highest quality news about business and economy in Georgia and worldwide. As Forbes, we are presented in 37 countries worldwide. And Mr. Ivanishvili is not the first, and trust me, not the last one, who has some complaints about Forbes and rankings, which is Forbes itself is a century and 5 years old almost, and for sure we will exist another 100 years as the most influential business edition worldwide.
Thank you for responding on behalf of Forbes Georgia. And my last question to you on this. Bidzina Ivanishvili said he's retaining just 200 million as a personal fortune. Yes, we are good at counting money. Does this figure seem realistic personally to you?
As for me, and so far, my answer is no. My answer is, while all the assets, or at least majority of assets, are allocated and diverted to the charity foundation, where he and his family members are represented as the sole beneficiaries, this will not change the calculation of the assets, and it was done as it was done previously. And we should not forget also that we are talking only about Georgian assets and owned by Mr. Ivanishvili and his family. And we do not have much information about the rest allocated abroad, worldwide, or might be invested in various directions through the international banks or investment funds. So, me personally, I do not expect dramatic changes in his wealthy calculations and positioning within Forbes ranks, as you have mentioned in his personal fortune in figures. Yeah.
Let's now give the floor to your interview with David Sangulashvili, who is the new head of the Parliamentary Committee on Economy and Economic Policy.
Yes, Elena. What are the main challenges and opportunities ahead in 2021 for Georgia's economy? And then what are his thoughts on Bidzina Ivanishvili's final departure from the politics? David Sangulashvili sat down with the checkpoints. Due to this unprecedented situation, and Georgia is not origin in this regards, we still face a lot of challenges, including yourself. Congrats with your new position. But at the same time, we both do understand, including business community, how challenging this position is in these regards. Where do you stand right now? And could you identify sort of priorities as a new chairman of Economic Committee?
First of all, I would like to thank you for invitation. I want to say that this crisis, by the type and content of the completely different,
absolutely,
compared to the crisis
you mean
that we have, the previous
yeah.
ones, oil crisis, banking crisis, etc. This is the crisis of demand and supply. The biggest challenge of the crisis today, it is the SME sector and FDI. SME is the main driver of the country economy, and it struggles a lot today due to the lack of capital, due to the unstable environment, and many other environmental problems that was raised due to the pandemic. And regarding the FDI, of course, today competition to
worldwide, you mean?
Worldwide competition for FDI among the countries is pretty high. So we have to be very proactive, very flexible in decisions in response to the investors to attract FDIs.
I remember your question. It was sort of like you resumed it within your colleagues, I mean, within the members of the parliament. You asked Prime Minister Gaharia to be more precise in regards of FDI, and your question was, what's your practical attitude in regards of FDI? How you gonna attract FDI in this regards? And there was an answer, but is this answer similar to your thoughts and vision yourself?
Of course, I completely agree with the Prime Minister's vision regarding that part. As far as
he said there will be no rules in regards of
this is reality. We have to come
no
out
rules
from
in regards of attracting FDI.
Sure.
That was his response.
We have to come out from the situation and the environment that we have today. As far as you have to discuss every situation case by case. You have to make every decision case by case, and it is exactly the response on the question you just give to me. That every possibility of FDI, you have to discuss case by case and make decisions regarding this situation. As far as today, there is no recipes or no formulas how you can make decisions, or all the formulas that worked before pandemic, it doesn't work for the situation today.
So it means that you not just share, but you also agree that it should be personalized relations with potential investors, what Prime Minister also identified.
Exactly, and this is the advantage of the small countries, and this is the advantage of the government we have today.
Within other challenges, there is one which still counts as a major one for the beginning of this year, and I mean tariffs for energy, natural gas and water supply. For both of us to take into consideration the last 3 years, lari depreciated to dollar, it's around 26%. It was visible, it was 3 years while tariffs were fixed, and GNR was on its way to overview and fix the new tariffs. Do you consider this as one of the major challenges for 2021, together with stable lari exchange course?
Regarding the challenge, we had to first identify how we have to go forward and what would be the strategy in the energy sector, starting with the government and with society. Because if we should be ready for this kind of tariff increases in case we will not develop the sector. Because sector development is very important, starting with the infrastructure, ending with the
you mean the generation?
Right.
Generation part of the energy supply.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is very important. So we have to be, make strategic decision how we have to go forward.
Yeah.
This is one part. And regarding the challenges of tariff increase, it is if business and SME sector in general has a stable forecasted environment, then it should not be a big problem because they will adapt to the situation.
I know how personally for you is important in regards of energy generation and supply not to be dependent on import in these regards, which is the biggest outflow of the currency. I mean, dollar or euro as it is up to contract in this. How important for your committee, personally for you, will be in the future these particular cases, our energy efficiency as well, together with our energy independence?
First of all, I want to say that we have to use resources that we have internally for few reasons. First, first for the lari stability, it is very important because energy sector is one of the biggest import that we have today. And the second, for the energy independence.
There was another challenging, maybe emotional, I don't know, it's up to your answer, while the chairman of the ruling party, Mr. Ivanishvili, resigned both from the party as a chairman and as the founder, etc. How it reflects on your plans, and do you update it in this regards, anything for 2021 and following?
In this challenging environment, this will be really a challenge to our team, but the responsibilities that we took during the election campaign, of course, and the program that we have for next 4 years, of course, it will be fulfilled and going to the end.
David, in your previous conversations with Forbes and business media, you are mentioning about possibilities, well, not just possibilities, but sort of deficit while using possibilities and opportunities in regards of FTA and what Georgia has as a competitive advantage, while chairing one of the major committee in regards of economic development. Do you still consider that you're going to push this direction further?
First of all, let's say actually how Georgian economy will be transferred and what will be the priorities. Of course, tourist sector is one of the will remain one of the main priorities due to the geographic location, due to the Georgian nature. And hospitality.
Yes,
hospitality, right. And of course, it will be one of the main priorities of the Georgian economy, but we should not lose the opportunity that we have. It is free trade agreements, because only 7 countries in the world,
including ourselves, correct, yeah,
has this much free trade agreements that we have today, and we have advantage, geographical advantage compared to that countries. For example, Switzerland or Singapore, they are both countries who has free trade agreements with Europe and China. But in terms of the geographic location, we have advantage, and we have to use and utilize till the end this opportunity that we have.
And are we still in a process of finalizing other FTA agreements?
We're almost till the end to finalize free trade agreement with India and working with USA and Gulf countries. And at the end, this is one of the biggest advantage that might be opportunity for business to invest, not only the Georgian business, but the international business, to use this opportunity for sure.
Thank you so much and good luck.
Thank you very much.
Interesting indeed. And now it's my turn to talk about the main development globally, and this can be very short, just 2 words in fact. Capitol Hill. And of course, the second impeachment of President Trump, making him the first US president impeached twice. Pictures of storming Capitol Hill that we saw from Georgia were astonishing. Trump's supporters stormed the seat of US government and clashed with police, leading to the death of around 4 people. The violence brought to a halt congressional debate over Democrat Joe Biden's election win. In the House and Senate chambers, Republicans were challenging the certification of November's election results. Before the violence, President Trump had told supporters on the National Mall in Washington that the election had been stolen. Hours later, as the violence mounted inside and outside the U.S. Capitol, he appeared on video and repeated the false claim. He told protesters, "I love you," and described the people who stormed the Capitol complex as patriots. This is not America. This was the first thing that crossed my mind while watching the story developing.
I will agree here, Elena, again. Footages that we saw were quite unusual for the US, the democracy always known for its respect of institution, law and order.
Exactly, Georgi. By the way, it was very interesting how the social media responded, sparking a hot debate, which, by the way, continues to this day, whether or not these media platforms violated freedom of speech rules. The march was partly organized online, including on Facebook groups and pages. Donald Trump has been suspended from Twitter and Facebook after tweeting to supporters who attacked the U.S. Capitol. In a social media message to protesters, he said, "I love you," before telling them to go home. He also repeated false claims about election fraud. Facebook removed the video. We removed it because, on balance, we believe it contributes to rather than diminishes the risk of ongoing violence. YouTube removed the video because it violated policies on spreading election fraud. Twitter initially didn't take down the video, instead removing the ability to retweet, like, and comment on it and another tweet. However, it later removed them and suspended the outgoing president.
By the way, it is interesting to know what is your take on the debated issue? I mean, did social platforms violate freedom of speech and all the values coming regarding that?
Tough question. To tell the truth, I have a very dual attitude here. On the one hand, I understand that any of these platforms are in private ownership and their owners are the ones to set the rules. But on the other hand, since these platforms have the ambition to create a social good, or such is the way they are perceived, and they do not try to debunk these perceptions, then, well, the best disinfection comes from sun. So if these comments are more transparent, if they are seen and heard, then maybe we individually have more chance to respond to them. My main point here is that there is an extremely thin line between protecting from misinformation and disinformation and censorship. And also, not that it answers your question directly, but it was also very interesting to watch how stocks reacted to the decision of Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. For example, Twitter lost 5 billion USD in market value after permanently banning Donald Trump. Facebook saw 34 billion USD raised from the market cap as the Donald Trump ban fallout continued to spook tech investors. So that was how the stocks
reacted. Very good review from you, Elena, I would say. But I know that there was some more than just a shock that followed Capitol Hill developments.
Yes, of course, Georgi, I talked to our friends and very interesting and different experts in the US and here in Georgia, and let me give you their thoughts and position, but that was before the impeachment. And let me start with David Kramer, former president of Freedom House.
This was the darkest day in America in my lifetime. 9/11 was an awful, tragic day on which nearly 3,000 people were killed. Today, democracy was attacked by fellow Americans who turned against their own country. Donald Trump bears responsibility for this crisis. It will take a long time for us to recover from this.
This was David Kramer. Next is Lincoln Mitchell, scholar and political analyst.
Unless the U.S. falls into pretty great instability, and I don't think that's going to be that extreme, the U.S. foreign policy under a new President Joe Biden will go back to a foreign policy that's very familiar to people in Georgia and elsewhere. Joe Biden's foreign policy will look a lot like Barack Obama's, Bill Clinton, the last couple years of George H.W. Bush, and of George W. Bush and all of George H.W. Bush, a kind of mainstream internationalist approach. Now, with regards to the kind of modeling aspect of this, I'm really of two minds here. I mean, I've worked in Georgia extensively, but also all over the world. And, most people I work with understand, in these countries, including Georgia, understand the flaws of American democracy. And what I think this means is that we in the United States, but also you in Georgia and colleagues in Georgia and colleagues elsewhere, we need to understand that the project of building and strengthening democracy in Georgia, in the U.S., in any country you can think of, should be a shared project.
And Fadi Asli, head of ICC in Georgia, who was very vocal about the events unfolding on Capitol Hill and caught our attention.
The storming of Capitol Hill is a symptom of lack of trust that many Americans are showing towards their democratic institutions for the right or the wrong reasons. President Trump's style of communication has deeply divided the country in the past 4 years, and we witness a real cultural clash between, on one hand, a liberal leftist wing, and on the other hand, a deeply rooted conservative wing. As shocking as the storming of Capitol Hill looked to the rest of the world, since it symbolized the heart of American power, it was not more shocking than the protests and riots organized by the liberals and the leftists after the coronavirus started and the unfolding events that followed George Floyd's tragedy. After watching governors who had prosecuted desperate shop owners for opening their small businesses suddenly clear mass protests, after watching some other governors claim that it is nowhere written that protests should not be violent, after watching white people kiss the boots of black ones to expiate the sins of their race, after watching protesters bring down historic statues in the style of ISIS militants, after watching iconic movies withdrawn from the market to erase history, after watching congressmen kneel in guilt for the death of George Floyd for almost 9 minutes in a theatrical move, and after watching social media curbing freedom of expression, we realize that America has unfortunately lost its path and its leadership and cannot anymore give any other countries, including Russia and China, any lessons in democracy, freedom of speech or rule of law.
So, yes, Georgi, the U.S. already has this precedent, the first president in U.S. history impeached twice.
Impeached twice, correct.
Yes. Now, back to COVID agenda, unfortunately.
Vaccines and economy.
Yeah, definitely, yes. But we have to agree that much is still on vaccines in terms of economy. It was very promising to hear from the health minister, Ekaterina Tikaradze, that COVAX platform would give the chance to Georgia to buy Pfizer vaccine as early as mid-February.
Indeed, Elena. By the way, the U.S. is helping Georgia in this direction, as the minister told us. Here is what U.S. Ambassador to Georgia, Kelly Dannon, said after the meeting with Minister Ekaterina Tikaradze.
It was a very useful meeting, a good opportunity to receive an update on the government of Georgia's efforts to manage the pandemic as we head into 2021. We're all looking now at coordination, close coordination on implementing vaccination plans. This is going to be very important, not just in Georgia or in the United States, but globally, to be sure that we have good, solid vaccination implementation plans in place to keep our public safe and to be able to open up our economies and our schools as soon as possible.
Much is on vaccines, definitely, and not less is on banks, especially in Georgia with 2 systemic banks and less developed capital markets. Banks are also waiting for the vaccines for sure, but you can get more than that from the interview that the Checkpoints had with the head of the Banking Association of Georgia, Alexander Tsneladze. Let's start with a short summary of 2020. What can we see at this point as a COVID impact on the banking sector?
2020 was quite a tough year, not only due to the crisis itself, but also from the uncertainty stemming from that crisis. In March 2020, three main problems showed up before the banking sector. In the first place, this was the safety of their employees. The second was the safety of its consumers, keeping the sustainability and easy access to its services for them. And third, evaluating those risks that would be part of 2020 definitely, but also definitely reaching beyond it. Theoretically, we could say that our belief in March was that the rehabilitation period would kick off from summer already, and that would give us a chance to weigh specific figures by the end of the year and thus have more specific expectations of 2021 going ahead. However, the reality showed us that be a second wave or just a prolonged pandemic, we would have to wait till the first quarter of 2021 to see what are some possibilities of the country to recover its economy and what are some risks before the businesses for the coming years, 2021, 22 or 23. We believe that 2021 will be the year of overcoming those problems that are already on the agenda for the economy and business, and we can be looking at the perspective of full rehabilitation from 2022.
I understand that the uncertainty is still high, but what does the overall tendency show you? Do banks maintain at least minimal profitability, or are we talking about significant losses of the sector due to pandemic?
Some banks are already registering profits, but we are talking about very insignificant changes. The system profitability in total will be close to zero. But here we have to underline that the banking sector managed to maintain its operating profit from month to month, which means that banks are working, functioning, and generating operating profit. Losses mainly stem from the evaluation of those risks concerning credit portfolio.
What are some tendencies here? Do you expect a significantly worsened credit portfolio as a result of COVID impact?
It is early to talk about overdue credits. We have to say very specifically that paying loans will recover fully only from September next year, because credit rescheduling and restructuring was targeted to the companies that have had a specific calendar for repaying those loans, like paying once a year, for example. That's why we'll be evaluating overdue credits at the end of the year. It is yet early to talk in figures.
I understand that at the moment challenges outweigh the opportunities, probably. However, what are some lessons to learn from this pandemic, and what are some opportunities to monitor for future?
It is clear that digital online services have become a new must, and very quick steps should be taken in this direction. Now, what I mean more specifically, because I can say that the banking sector has been using and developing online services for over 20 years already, including plastic cards, internet and mobile banking. But today, quick steps should be taken not only by the banking sector, which has always been ahead in the implementing innovative approaches, even when the proper legislation might not have been still in place, or the region might not have had an experience in that sort of innovation. Today, not only the banking sector should be the driving force of this innovation in online services, but the legislation should also be put in place which would ensure the delivery of these services in the form that consumers have also utilized during the last years and to some extent due to pandemic. We see today that delivery service is quite problematic. E-commerce also faces challenges that we did not think of. It was expensive to implement and so worse. We can say that we have started working on these issues before the pandemic, but today the process is in a very active phase. Be it open banking or protecting personal information, we can say that active phase. One of the main goals of the banking sector in 2021 will be to give the full information to its consumers on types of personal information on an individual basis, and also how this information is protected within banks. This makes us believe that if there are people not using distance services till this day, by the end of 2021 there will be no such people, like the people who had no plastic cards, but today everyone has one.
You mentioned that the banking sector was ahead with innovative approaches, and this phrase triggered the following question. You will agree that many studies and many analysts have highlighted the fact that the growth of the banking sector was also ahead of the growth of the economy. You also mentioned in the very beginning of our conversation that performance of the banking sector would be very much dependent on how the economy performs, and that's true, especially when the two largest banks in the country are systemic banks. What are your thoughts on this interrelation of the recovery?
First, is the first time that the banking sector has outperformed GDP of our country. What does this mean? We can say that the performance of the economy and vulnerability of the economy is directly proportionate with the banking sector, and supporting the banking sector is directly reflected in the economic growth, which is very important. We are not the first one in the world in this direction. And the other more important part, which is assessed differently while talking about the crisis. In Georgia, we practically do not have capital market and alternative ways for the access to capital. The only resource for the capital in Georgia, we can say, are banks. Attitudes here very significantly. The first is that during crisis, capital markets become very vulnerable and might even intensify the crisis. And the second is that non-existence of capital market increases dependability on the banking sector. So we can say that to some extent, and not very directly, the banking sector mirrors the sustainability of the economy. As I have mentioned before, 2020 was a very difficult year.
Even though this was not a strictly financial crisis, the origin of this crisis was very different, stemming from health issues.
I did not turn into a financial crisis, and here we had several prerequisites for this: support from the government, support from the IFIs, focus on specific projects, and the readiness of the banking sector to overcome this crisis. There were specific recipes for the banking sector in order to stay resilient during the crisis. It was very important that this process was very coordinated. Experts were fully involved in monitoring. Recommendations of the banking sectors were heard and considered, and all of these led to the right recipes to guide the development the way it was guided. If we do not consider lari devaluation, then we can say that the banking sector has not grown, but we can definitely say that the banking sector has met 2021 with the ready attitude to identify new challenges and new opportunities.
Can we say that today such a recipe for the banking sector is opening up the economy and the vaccine? These two are very much interdependent these days.
I want to highlight that even mentioning vaccine has dramatically changed the whole picture, not only in Georgia, but globally, in the direction of expectations. But we have to be careful in hearing what are some timeframes in regards to the effectiveness of these vaccines. It might not be the most popular thing to say, but how businesses adapt to the existing situation and resist the targeted and temporary restrictions is a more realistic expectation, rather than us saying that tomorrow the economy should open up and stay that way.
But what about opening up with rules? Should this approach be so black or white?
Yes, this is exactly what I mean. This does not mean that we should stay at home and stay locked up for good. What is more risky, which risks are followed by which types of impacts? Which impacts are not risky? These are the main questions right now. if we look at the banking sector or many other businesses that have not stopped working for a single day, anytime during the pandemic, you were able to use banking services without restrictions. So what I want to say is that businesses should not depend on such simple rules to, for example, open doors for only 5 consumers at a time, but should adjust structurally its approach to doing business in the same times of the pandemic. And this is not true just for the banking sector, but all the sectors, including public one.
But very approximately, when should we wait for the light by the end of the tunnel?
When we adjust, this is all we can say at this point. Here are 2 main aspects. First, lockdowns cannot be only measure. And second, it is still needed to be seen what time it takes a vaccine to make us forget about the pandemic itself.
It was interesting talking to you, and I'm happy to be representing a business group that has not stopped working for a single day during pandemic. We are on the same page here. Thank you.
And now more on business through our traditional rubrics. Our viewers remember that we are constantly tracking businesses under the label or rubric Made in Georgia. Made in Georgia, that's our umbrella. Our reporter Salome Chipashvili joins us for the new season, for the checkpoints, with yet another interesting business coming from Gori, producing fruit juices and exporting them to the US, Qatar, Czech Republic, and from February 2021, most probably to Ukraine as well. Made in Georgia showcases Tamas Kakushadze, General Director of the company Hilari.
In 2016, we founded the company Hilari. In 2017, we started construction. We also had our first fruit-making season in the summer of 2017, when we processed about 150 to 180 tons of raw materials, stocked supplies, and started retail sales in January 2018. The total investment made in Hilari was about $535,000. The first raw material we got during the primary fruit processing period included peaches, apples, and 2 varieties of white and black grapes. At first, we managed to buy only 4 varieties of fruit. Then we started working on new varieties. We added cherry, kiwi, plum, and orange juices. We plan to add pomegranate juice in the future. It's important to mention that we do not add any artificial additives to our products. We do not add sugar either. We work by the principle of cold pressing. We use the method of pasteurization to get high-quality products. The enterprise can process about 800 tons of raw materials per year. Unfortunately, this amount of raw materials has not been processed because we're new to the market and there is no demand for the production of this scale yet. We have already processed about 600 tons of raw materials, which is about 350 tons of finished products. We have ISO certification, and we strive to incorporate European details in our product. The price of the products range from about 4 to 5 lari. We plan to expand production from next year. We want to cover all the food-related segments. We also want to start the production of dried fruits. Hilari was exported to Qatar in September 2018. In November, the products were exported to the US. However, the appearance of COVID-19 delayed orders and sales. In September 2020, we exported products for a trial run to Czech Republic. We have active negotiations with Ukraine. Our products were actually highly liked by Ukrainians who came here. Therefore, we will start active export to Ukraine from upcoming February.
And we are proceeding with our yet another traditional rubric, 30 Under 30. And traditionally, our reporter, Maria Madamia, follows the news of the prominent members of the Forbes Georgia list. This time, we will tell you about Faber, an app for digital shopping, which is kind of a mix of a marketplace and social network. Maria Madamia talked to Anna Nodolaberidze for the recent developments and achievements of Faber, an app that extends our accessibility of quite luxury brands as well.
So when we started, the huge challenge for us was the processes that we had, because we had few steps, authentication process, we had quality control check and delivery from seller to our office and from our office to the buyer. So it was a huge challenge for us because we wanted to proceed all these things in a high standard. And nowadays we think that we deliver the results, and the biggest thing that we have today is trust from our customers. That is the biggest thing for us. So before we only had application, and for now our product is developed in two different ways. We have now a website and a physical showroom, which will be opened straight away when the pandemic period will be finished. And also we are planning to improve our technology to make it easier for our users to use and more friendly and oriented totally to the customer's comfort. So I'm happy to share that 92% of our GMV is from Faber's returning customers, which is quite good result. And also want to mention that in 2020 in December our sales were record high because we had higher GMV than in whole 2019. So in Georgia, online shopping is not quite popular. It just started right after pandemic situation. So for some of our customers, online shopping first experience was with Faber. So they don't know like all the rules and all the processes that can be happened during this process. And also another thing that I can mention as a problem is operations, because in Georgia we don't have high standard operation services or companies that can deliver goods on the right time. And this let us make our courier company, because we could not trust other delivery companies to bring all the goods and items on time. For us as a digital company, COVID was a quite big challenge because we had to make some changes and improve our service as the demand was really high. But it really helped us to fasten all these processes and become better and better every day with the situation.
And Georgi, let me remind once again our viewers, those especially that are still under 30, to visit Forbes G and use the time that is left to apply and secure a place in the competition for Forbes Georgia list 30 under 30 and join the bigger Forbes global network. Please use this opportunity.
Yes, and on this note, we'll wrap up the checkpoints of 2021. For more, I strongly advise you to follow BMG and Forbes G to stay tuned and updated on local and global developments in business and economy. We will definitely meet at 10 p.m. next Sunday.
And before that, we will leave you off with a teaser of what you might read in Forbes Georgia January issue. And remember, Forbes Georgia is your guide to success.
The nature of the virus is as follows: you fight and it fights back. COVID-19 has an evil weapon, arsenic on him. For how long will this last? This question has remained unanswered for a long time now. In its January issue, Forbes Georgia managed to answer the question what to expect in 2021. The monument of the fearless girl on the main cover reflects the pandemic year. Another major story of the publication concerns the 25-year business of a law firm. Gordzadze speaks about achievements and plans of the Gordzadze Law Office. You will read about these following topics in the January issue of the Forbes Georgia.
How many millions of income do Georgian supermarkets have? Forbes Georgia counted the significant numbers of last year in leaderboards and summarized Georgia's position in the 2020 rankings. Data from the insurance sector during the pandemic were also published. The publication tells you about the COVID-19 control system in Georgia and the points that we should observe in the post-COVID period. How well are we keeping up with the changed reality, especially now that time has accelerated even more? Ivanishvili introduces us to 13 points in the author's column, which should become important for us before we wake up to a new world. One of the success stories is about Rum Patrol Georgia, which continued to grow despite the pandemic. Forbes Georgia did not miss out on this story. David Kemertelidze's business activities in Georgia and abroad is another exclusive material of the January issue. Georgian investments in the production of ferroalloys in Kazakhstan, its plans and challenges. Read in the January issue of Forbes Georgia. As for women entrepreneurs, they are increasingly occupying the central stage in the world. Accordingly, Forbes is expanding its annual ranking of the richest self-made women, where now, unlike last year, you will meet 100 women entrepreneurs instead of 80. Successful women are present in the Georgian market too, and among them is Elena Shavdia with her own brand and the inscription Made in Georgia. The designer talks to Forbes Georgia about the effects of the pandemic. In addition, this month's issue answers the main and most pressing questions today about why tariffs are rising, how to investigate the crisis, and how to survive the pandemic. Read Forbes Georgia and be successful.